Right. So let's talk about my least favourite aspect of the Batman, which is something that I alluded to in my last video but didn't go into real detail about because I was waiting for this one. So for me, the last 30 minutes or so felt almost entirely unnecessary from a narrative standpoint. I enjoyed them, I found them entertaining enough, but they just didn't feel like they had to be there. And let's discuss why. So the film introduces Batman to us, and right off the bat, pun 100% intended, he's the most terrifying version of this character that we've ever seen in live action. For me, Keaton was that kind of composed and skilled Batman who always seemed to have eyes on the back of his head, which may be because he genuinely couldn't turn it in the damn suit, but hey ho, regardless. He was a skilled combatant with an ice cool temperament. Pattinson is about as far removed as you could possibly hope to show in this film. He's a ruthless brawler who thinks with his heart rather than his head, and I appreciate that. It's early days in his career, so maybe he will find that cool level of that cool mentality that Keaton showed as his career progresses. But for now, this is what we get. We get a tank who takes way more damage than probably should be possible. I can't really imagine any of the other Batmen that we've seen take a direct shotgun blast to the chest or an explosion straight into their faces. He should end up looking like Two-Face by the end of this film. Pattinson's character is relentless, sure, and in the opening scene of Gotham's criminals looking into the shadows while he's monologuing, it's really, really effective stuff. It seals his grand entrance. You understand the terror that he strikes into criminals, and his legend is presented as almost an omnipresent thing, and you completely buy into the fact that this could be a deterrent symbol to criminals. You completely understand that. For maybe the first time in these live action films, Bale had his moments where he seemed really intimidating, but when he wasn't on the screen, there wasn't a feeling of, he could show up around any corner, which even in the opening monologue you get. You're looking into every shadow because you're just anticipating this dramatic and terrifying reveal. Then we get the first real moment of incredible sound design that is persistent throughout this film. You hear the thudding of Pattinson's boots and the crunching of every single blow that he deals to the gang. It's really incredible stuff. And it's satisfying for sure, but it's also overly brutal. And we wonder if he enjoys this a little bit too much, as he leaves the victim of the gang's attack cowering and distressed as he expects that his protector is going to turn on him next. Later on, we're introduced to the Riddler, and recognise that he and Bruce, they share similar goals. The Riddler rids the city of corruption. He exposes the modern society to be one which is built from lies, which is a feat that Bruce might have actually thanked him for had his methods not been so destructive. But as the film transpires, Bruce realises the horrifying truth that his own methods are not proving to be as beneficial to the city as a preventative measure in the way that he might have thought or hoped. But they're instead inspiring radicalists like the Riddler to follow in his footsteps by enacting vengeance on those that are guilty and are surely deserving of punishment. Only he does so without the guidance of a moral compass which values human life, which Bruce possesses. After Bruce puts a stop to the Riddler's schemes, he faces him in jail, where he learns about the Riddler's admiration of him and realises that there's a great deal of responsibility that he now has in his public role. He learns to release much of his inner hatred as he sees before him now a man who let his own vengeful wishes fully consume him. Bruce leaves the prison, armed now with a burning desire to atone for the crimes which have been committed in the name of his family and their legacy. And he understands that it's not through his nightly escapades or his crusade alone that he's going to be able to see this poisonous city be detoxified. So, after this narrative arc, he can now move forward, vowing to use his status as a member of the social elite to begin to tidy up the city and heal it from within as a humanitarian, while also looking to heal his own soul. You know, it's just lovely stuff. Symbol of hope, not vengeance. The end. Roll credits.
Right.
That is, in itself, a satisfying conclusion which remains extremely focused and personal to our protagonist. And honestly, it's where I think this film should have ended. But that's not the conclusion that we get. The problem is that this conclusion shows the Riddler to perhaps be a person for whom redemption and rehabilitation is within sight, and his tragic backstory presents his motivations as somewhat morally defensible. Besides the collateral damage that's suffered by Alfred, I recall, to be honest, only one incident where innocents are shown to be maybe harmed by the Riddler during this film. That one incident I'm talking about is when the DA's car comes crashing through the church during the funeral scene. On a side note also, I find the method, the way in which Riddler tries to assassinate Bruce Wayne to be uncharacteristically sloppy. Whereas he's been very meticulous before, but now he's decided to just rely on the postal service for some reason. It just seems a bit convenient to me, and the only explanation I can really think about is that Matt Reeves was trying to elicit an easy emotional response from the audience. But even then, I don't think it really works. This is Alfred, and this is Andy Serkis. You know, if you cast aside, it could be anyone playing this character, but you don't think he's going to die. I find it interesting that in the film, Batman and Riddler, they share a similar body count, I think. Batman surely racks up quite the death toll during his vehicular pursuit of the Penguin. And what really annoyed me the most about this, and this scene in general, which I spoke about briefly in my spoiler-free video, is the fact that there's no moment where Bruce recognises the damage that he's caused. He's probably killed a fair few people in this chase scene. And the shot of him walking towards the upside-down Penguin's car, it's a cool one, it is. But the flames behind them, I kind of laughed in the theatre because the fact that there's no moment of self-reflection or introspection on Bruce's part, there's no moment where Gordon holds him to account for this catastrophic damage that he's caused. I just found it kind of disappointing. I don't know. Instead, we get a very entertaining, yes, but misplaced, I think, comedic interrogation exchange between Gordon, Batman, and the Penguin. Riddler is kind of right. There is no reason why Batman is any more morally righteous than he is. But this is exactly why you can't have the film end here. This is why Reeves feels the need to extend the runtime so much. Because you could really show Riddler as being a catalyst for a great societal improvement, the scale of which Batman never really generates during the story. And so, the writing team has to think of a way to show the Riddler as being morally indefensible. But in doing so, they abruptly dispatch of many of the interesting grey complexities within the narrative in favour of this really quite painfully unremarkable and derivative black and white presentation. So what they come up with in order to maintain this foundation that many of superhero films are built on, superhero stories are built on, which is one of black versus white, easily discernible good versus evil. What they do is they reveal that the Riddler has placed strategically bombs all around the Gotham coastline, and it's at this moment that the bombs detonate, flooding the city and washing away the corruption so that Gotham may once again be built from the ground up. He's also amassed a small legion of followers on Twitch or some other dark web alternative who have obtained arms and have donned Riddler costumes of their own. And with this gear, a large number of them, a surprisingly large number of them given his modest number of followers that were shown, they all make their way to the centre of the city and they assume vantage points at the ceremony for the appointment of Gotham's new mayor. This honestly quite wooden character that I would have liked to have seen more of in the film so we could establish more about what really drives her, what makes her tick. But their plan is to shoot as many members of Gotham's elite as is possible so that the city might truly be cleansed once and for all of all hierarchical imbalance. It's a big doomsday event that, in my opinion, was just a bit too much for what had been an extremely tight and neatly crafted Batman story with a really personal sense of stakes attached to it, where Bruce has to come to terms with the fact that his family weren't the peak of virtue as he may have thought. But what about those who don't belong to the more elite groups in the city? It just seems out of character to me that the Riddler would seek to kill, to flood the homes and ruin the lives of so many innocent people without just cause. That's not how the movie presents this character. And it's clearly here to draw a line between the Riddler as being a sympathetic anti-hero, as Catwoman perhaps is, and as a mass murdering psychopath. I just think it's a bit of a shame. And look, maybe some people in the city actually agree with his criticisms of widespread injustice. In fact, one such critic was overheard by Bruce earlier at the church. I get the impression that, based on how he addresses his followers, he may want to take that guy under his wing rather than ruin what modest life that dude has already been dealt in life. Because, let me tell you, there's a big flaw in Riddler's plan, which is to say that the rich people, they'll be just fine. The people that you don't kill, they'll still uphold that corruption. And they have enough money to rebuild their lives from the ground up after you've ruined all their assets. But the common people that you claim to represent, it's a different story. But this also coincidentally leads me into what I was talking about in my spoiler-free video with regards to Paul Dano's performance as the Riddler. I think that Dano's an incredible actor, but this felt like a bit of a misfire, a rare one on his part, in the sense that in a fictional world that's presented as being so sleek and so subtle and complex, the decision to have him just be blatantly unhinged is a strange one to me. His mannerisms and his various tics, they're all just too...
I'm the Joker, baby!
He's goofy in a Frank Gorshin kind of way, whereas I think this setting was really crying out for a more composed and sinister take on the character. One that's less centered around the idea of creating chaos and upsetting the established order, which is someone else's prerogative, and more about proving his superiority over the people who have cast him aside during his troubled life. The essence of Riddler's character is all about ego, but that's just my interpretation. But I think I'm right in saying that, and that's just my 2 cents and my reading of where I think this character goes wrong. The scenes after the conversation between Batman and Riddler, they're all wonderfully put together. They look stunning, and they're exciting, and they provide some of the standout moments, like Batman fighting the Riddler's followers, and then heroically saving the elites as he allows himself to be baptized in the waters below, re-emerging as a symbol of hope that's going to lead these people out of this disaster. It's all very biblical, very symbolic, and I appreciate that, and I enjoyed that. But as good as these ideas were, and as well executed as they are from a cinematic perspective, I just couldn't help but shake the feeling that they subtract from the Riddler's character. I don't know. Had the movie ended with Batman leaving the Riddler to rot in his cell, Bruce now troubled by the consequences of his own actions and vowing to find a different way to carry out justice, then I think the movie might have been an easy 8.5 or a 9 out of 10 for me. But I just feel that the loss of focus and the jarring change of pace, it just weakened the film's overall impact for me. I understand the necessity nowadays to have a great spectacle, a great set piece to end your film, explosions and all that, but it felt like this film was really going to shake up the established order. It does so in so many ways, and that narratively I think it just let me down a little bit. But look, none of the narrative issues that I feel are present in the film, none of them can take away from the fact that this is a really, really good movie. And it's a superhero movie which has a strong directorial voice behind it, which is very rare nowadays. And so for that reason, I'm happy that it exists. I'm happy that everyone seems to have loved it. But I hope that you can understand my stance on it. But regardless, I'm excited to see what Matt Reeves comes up with next, because it was a really enjoyable film, and I think it's a step in the right direction for sure.